With your permission, Professor, I would suggest we go to the second point.
Yes.
And actually, as I open, you referred to, I must add one slight observation, the question of land holdings. I would say that any study of the British mandatory land registers will show that 70% of the land, which is now Israel, was government-owned. Belonged to the government, the mandate, formerly to the Ottomans. It never belonged to any separate Arab political entity in Palestine down the ages. The only times this Palestine was a separate political entity was twice under Jewish rule, once under the Crusaders.
I'm talking about a private property.
A private property, and on the private property, which was taken through the war, we have promised and are ready to give full compensation. This has been promised time and again to the United Nations, and in this respect I can speak officially, although here I'm in a personal capacity. But Professor, let's come back to this question of the historical connection to which you referred. You're quoted having said Israel has no historical right, Jewish people, to Israel. May I say some facts in this respect?
Yes.
Number one, the continuity of Jewish residence in the land of Israel never ceased at any time in history. And I can quote you records on that, century after century. Secondly, the return to Israel has been central in our religious faith, in our prayers, in our festivals, in every aspect of our national aspiration. Thirdly, the international community has recognized the validity of that right. Balfour Declaration, League of Nations, United Nations. Fourthly, even the Arabs at the beginning did. There was a message from Emir Faisal to Dr. Weizmann. He headed the Arab delegation to the peace conference in Versailles, and there's an agreement between them, and another letter on that agreement, Emir Faisal writes that he welcomes the Jews home.
Yes, I was there. I was in on that, yes.
Well, I hope that I haven't misquoted the Emir.
No, quite right.
Well, at least I have very clear testimony on that. So you cannot put it in the category of saying that a title which went obsolescent in 132. It is not that. Has been a continuous link and aspiration century after century. Some of our greatest religious thought and work has been produced there. The Mishnah, the Jerusalem Talmud, Medrash, the Targum, Masorah, and right down to Shulchan Aruch, which is the basic code of Jewish law, all produced century after century in continuous residence there. And time and again our people hoped to achieve independence, but that didn't work out. In 1917, a new motive began, a new momentum, but it was there all the time. You speak of the first settlement being in 1881. I can show you documents of Jewish settlements and towns in Palestine of those days from the 10th century.
Safed in the 16th century is the case.
Even earlier, Sadia Gaon, Benjamin Metudela of the 12th century, Maimonides, Yehuda Halevi, 12th century, Nachmanides, early 13th century. Continuous residence. Rabbi Estori Farchi, author of Kaftor Vofera, continuous residence all the time. And the whole motive of our life was linked up with that. We feel that the present revival of the Third Commonwealth of Israel is a vindication of immortal prophecy. That has been our course down the ages. We've traversed the valley of death, and now under graceful providence, we've come to the uplands of fulfillment. That's how we see our history. It was not snapped. You feel that we were a fossil and went off somewhere and sort of fell on the skating ring and used Montreal terms. We didn't. We didn't. We remained vital and alive and creative. And may I, sir, at this stage express some surprise that in your book you don't refer at all to that line of Jewish creativity. And by the way, Einstein also belongs to that collective fossil category.
The ambassador raised two questions just now. One was the question about the Jewish claim or title to Palestine, and the other was about the word fossil that I've used, not only about the Jews, but about quite a number of different people, for instance the Parsis and various Christian sects, and to some extent the Greeks.
So you do differentiate between fossilism, I've been reading your books, and archaism. Parsis and we are in the fossil category. Archaic, you've got there the Greeks, I think the Turks, in terms of Turks, and the Norwegians and the Irish. I'm not going to deal with the Irish problem. I was born there.
Don't let's bring that into it.
No. I have a feeling that they've always been well able to look after themselves. So I leave that to the Irish ambassador.
I think the Israelis look after themselves too pretty well. But let me come seriously now back to this question of the Jewish title. Now, what is remarkable about the Jews, what is, I suppose, made the Jewish communities that exist today is, as the ambassador truly says, the fact that they didn't lose their memory of their homeland. In this they were exceptional among the people who were uprooted and deported by the Assyrians and Babylonians all that time ago in the 8th and 7th and 6th centuries BC. The next kingdom, who had the same religion, the kingdom of Israel, didn't, like the people of the kingdom of Judah, manage to maintain its corporate identity in exile. As we know, the 10 tribes disappeared, unless the British Israelites are right in saying the British are the last 10 tribes, and I don't think they are right about that. Today, the kingdom of Israel is represented only by a few hundred Samaritans, some in Jordan, some in the present state of Israel, and all the other peoples of Syria, temporaries of Judah and Israel, have completely disappeared, whereas the Jews have kept their identity. And they've kept it by the memory of Palestine. I mentioned just now that I think the Jews of today and tomorrow are going to be the Palestinian Arab refugees, because they are in just a state of mind in which the Jews were immediately after the exile by Nebuchadnezzar. And Palestine seems to have some magic over people's minds that once they have lived in it, as the Arabs have more recently than the majority of the Jews, your emotions never can let hold of that land. But anyway, now, what about this claim? I would say that if one has that historical and emotional relation to a country, one has a certain claim to have the freedom of that country, but under one condition, that one doesn't carry one's claim to a point where it is going to cause hardship, wrong, and injustice to the existing inhabitants of the country. There is a thing in law, and I think in all forms of law, called the statute of limitations, which, for the sake of producing the minimum amount of hardship and suffering, says that a legal claim does expire after such and such a time. Now, if we take AD 135 was a time when, except in parts of Galilee, the solid Jewish population in Palestine was uprooted by action of the Romans, which I don't defend. I don't have to defend the Emperor Hadrian, fortunately. If we take that date and say the statute of limitations doesn't apply even to people who lost their hold in AD 135, what happens to Montreal? Well, the Algonquins had it only 300 or 400 years ago, less than 400 years ago. Is that to go back to them? It's much less than AD 135. Is England to go back to the Welsh? It is. It caused a good deal of hardship, that's all I can say. You have to deport about 50 million English and turn them into refugees.